I'd like to call this special board meeting to order. Each board member has been properly notified in writing on August 2nd via electronic mail and U.S. Postal Service of the intent to establish an official school board meeting to be held on Monday, August 8, 2011, and the purpose of the meeting. Proper notices have been posted in the administration building bulletin board, the front entrance of the administration building, and all educational centers 24 hours prior to the meeting. The meeting has been advertised in one local newspaper, posted on the district's website. Therefore, this meeting is called to order August 8th at 6:13 p.m. I ask that you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I ask that you please remain standing and join us for a moment of silence as we reflect on the men and women serving in the United States Armed Forces, those fighting in harm's way, our prisoners of war, and those missing in action. Thank you. Please be seated. Item 4 on the agenda is announcement of executive sessions. I would like to announce the following executive sessions were held. Monday, June 20th, 2011 at 8:45 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Monday, June 27th at 6 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Tuesday, July 12th at 8 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Monday, July 18th at 6 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Thursday, July 28th at 6 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Thursday, August 4th, 7 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Monday, August 8th at 5:30 p.m. to discuss personnel matters. Before we move further into the agenda, I have a couple of announcements to make. The first announcement is that earlier today, the Ojrsd Roberts School District and the Board of Directors received resignation letter from our superintendent, Dr. Joel DiBartolomeo. As a result of that resignation that's come before us for acceptance, there's a couple of changes to this evening's agenda. I'm going to read a statement that explains what is unfolding on the agenda, and then I'm going to go ahead and read the changes in the motions. Following this, we'll have board discussion and public comment. Dear Ojrsd Roberts School District community, earlier today, Monday, August 8th, the Ojrsd Roberts School Board received a letter of resignation from our superintendent, Dr. DiBartolomeo. The Ojrsd Roberts School Board, over the past few weeks, has had private discussions with Dr. DiBartolomeo about his unexpected separation from employment with the district. Dr. DiBartolomeo has voluntarily decided to submit his resignation effective October 7th, 2011, and will be using his earned 44 days of vacation and sick leave until then. This represents the extent of the financial obligations of the district to Dr. DiBartolomeo under the agreement we will be voting on this evening. While we are disappointed by this unexpected period of transition, I want to assure the school district community that this situation is completely different from what we encountered in 2009. This is a resignation, a mutually agreeable separation. It's not a termination or a buyout. We have an opportunity now with this transition to keep our school district moving forward. We thank Dr. DiBartolomeo for his service, and we wish him and his family well. Although this board has worked very hard to be transparent to the community about its actions, the board and Dr. DiBartolomeo have agreed to keep Dr. DiBartolomeo's reasons for his resignation confidential, and the board fully intends to honor this understanding. We will not answer any questions about this confidential personnel matter, and we seek to respect Dr. DiBartolomeo's privacy rights. Upon receiving Dr. DiBartolomeo's resignation, Your school board and district leaders immediately began planning for a smooth leadership transition so that our educational programs, our support systems, and our district operations will continue uninterrupted. Be assured that your school leaders and building principals have been hard at work planning for the start of our school year, and this too will continue uninterrupted. We are fortunate to have an outstanding central administrative team and building principals to manage the district at this time of transition. Dr. Soder, our assistant superintendent, will fulfill the functions as substitute superintendent until an acting superintendent is appointed to lead the district through the 2011-2012 school year. We have been provided a list of highly qualified retired superintendents who will guide us during this time period. We will be interviewing candidates shortly. We are also fortunate to have one of the most respected business administrators in the state, Mrs. Jacqueline Crumine, who has kept the district fiscally sound in an era when many districts are making drastic cuts in their educational programs. Our Human Resources Department will continue to play an important role in the district. Over the last several months, we have contracted the leadership services of Dr. Leticia Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez's period of service will end later this month. The board would like to thank Dr. Rodriguez for her professionalism and guidance during her service. Leadership of the department is transitioning to our new Director of Human Resources, Jessica Hefner. We welcomed Mrs. Hefner to our district on August 1st. As a result of the retirement of Dr. David Hemberger, our People Services Director, the board and the administration felt that it was time to study our student services needs. We will be contracting this evening with Dr. Barbara Stevenson to analyze our Pupil Services Department while working with Dr. Ed Freed to assess our pupil services and special education needs. Dr. Stevenson comes to us as the Acting Director of Special Education Division of the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. Dr. Stevenson is also a retired superintendent from the New Hope Soulbury School District and was the acting superintendent for both Methacton and Phoenixville. She also acted as a building principal in Lower Moreland. We expect a productive transition in this very important school division. We are excited to have Dr. Stevenson joining the O&J Roberts team. Also on tonight's agenda is an appointment for an interim principal at the West Vincent Elementary School. The decision to make this an interim appointment is based on the unexpected change in our district's leadership. The board fully expects that Janet Wolf will bring strong leadership skills to West Vincent Elementary School. Finding a qualified superintendent permanently to fill this position takes time. As a board, we will not rush this important decision. We will wait until the 3 newly elected members join the board in December to establish a longer-term plan. This is a responsibility and a professional courtesy that all elected and incoming school directors deserve. The board fully expects these necessary leadership transitions to be seamless to our students. The administrative team and building principals have our full support. We are working together in a professional and collaborative manner to ensure that the O&J Roberts students and their educational needs remain our district's focus. I ask that the O&J Roberts School District community also fully support our educational leaders at this time. Respectfully, John W. Stone, School Board President, and the O&J Roberts School Board of Directors. So as a result of that statement that I read and the various leadership changes that were addressed, there are 2 motions that I would like to introduce into this evening's reading for the record. The first motion, should I read these entirely? First motion to approve an agreement and general release dated August 8, 2011 with Dr. Joel T. Bartolomeo and acceptance of Dr. Joel Bartolomeo's resignation as district superintendent as of the close of business on October 7, 2011. The second motion that I'm introducing to the record is a motion to appoint Dr. Soder as substitute district superintendent effective August 9, 2011 until the earlier of 1 October 7, 2011 or when the district appoints an acting superintendent. There are 2 additional addendums to motions this evening, and I'm just going to cover those at the same time here. Amended motion 7.3 of the appointments for certificated positions. We are going to be removing Melissa DeBlasi, as she declined the position. Amended motion for West Vincent Principal, which is agenda item 7.7. Motion to appoint Janet Wolf as interim principal of the West Vincent Elementary School for the time period August 9, 2011 until June 30, 2012, based upon an agreement prepared by our school district's solicitor. So at this time, we will move to item 5 on the agenda, which is an opportunity for public comment on agenda items, which also include the 2 new motions that I introduced, as well as the motions that were amended. Now is an opportunity for public comment on agenda items, information, proposals, and statements from individuals or delegations pertaining to items on the agenda. We ask that speakers indicate your name, township of residence, and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Item 7.13. This item is to approve a district wellness program for $30,000 a year. I just wanted to comment that last year, this wellness coordinator was approved for $25,500. So my question is, must it be increased? Have we looked at if that needs to be increased? And you're going to tell me, well, that's covered under grant, so it's not really taxpayer money, but it's still my money. So if you can just say if that needs to be increased. And then the second part of that is the district employee and community relations independent contract. One question is, what is this? The second, why $48,300? And again, in October of last year, we approved Joanne to serve as communication PR contractor to produce 1 issue of advocate and 2 months of public relations. I guess my question is it the same thing? Is it different? If it's the same thing, last year we agreed $3,400 for 2 months. So again, why the $48,300? The taxpayers do not want to pay for increases in salaries or independent contracts when they themselves are taking pay cuts for their own companies to stay in business. I would like the goal for next year's budget to be equal or less than this year's budget. This is one of the items that I think the board should be able to question the administration about and see if this is necessary for the education of our children, and if so, if the cost can be reduced or at least not increased. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gavin. Would you like to take a moment and explain what's happening with this item?
Related to the first item under 7.13, independent contract for the district's wellness program, the Pottstown Wellness Foundation has increased the amount of the grant to the district based upon increased duties from Mrs. Rector. So she will be receiving more, but all of those dollars are covered by the Wellness Foundation. And there is, in the agreement, it does state that the position is contingent upon receipt of the funds. So there won't be any additional dollars. Regarding item number 2, the independent contract for the employee and community relations, this is an agreement with Mrs. Rector that does include, it expired as of June 30th. This is a new agreement that will pick up work that she has done before, the advocate and some other communications type responsibilities that she has for the district. So it includes that as well. Plus, she will be picking up some additional duties within the Human Resource Department with respect to staff communications. And you will see on the August 22nd agenda that we will be eliminating a position because she will be increasing some of those duties. So we'll be eliminating a one-point position, and there will be actual budget savings related to this agenda item.
Thank you, Mrs. Crine. At this time, we'll move to item 6 on the agenda, board discussion. That brings us to item 7 on the agenda, new business. I'm going to begin with the 2 new motions that were introduced earlier in the meeting. So we'll start with the first motion. I'll read that. Motion to approve an agreement and general release dated August 8, 2011 with Dr. DiBartolomeo and acceptance of Dr. DiBartolomeo's resignation as district superintendent as of the close of business on October 7, 2011.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hughes, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Second motion this evening will be the motion to appoint Dr. Soder as substitute district superintendent effective August 9th, 2011 until the earlier of October 7th or when the district appoints an acting superintendent.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hughes, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. This brings us to item 7.1 on the agenda, approval for the Kindercamp teachers.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Belinsky, second by Mrs. McMeekin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.2, approval of the extracurricular and supplemental interscholastic academic athletic activities as presented.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Belinsky, second by Mrs. McMeekin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. This brings us to item 7.3, approval of certificated positions. This is the motion that I amended in the earlier comments with the removal of the individual.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. McMeekin, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.4, approval of the appointment of the following non-certificated position as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. McMeekin,
Second.
second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.5, approval of the amendments to the temporary professional and individual contracts effective August 23rd as presented. Moved by Mrs. Belinsky, second by Mrs. McMeekin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.6, approval to accept resignation, change, and assignments as presented.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. McMeekin, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.7, this represents the amended motion that I read earlier. So the motion we will be voting on this evening reads as follows. Agenda item 7.7, a motion to appoint Janet Wolf as interim principal of the West Vincent Elementary School for the period of August 9th, 2011 until June 30th, 2012, based upon the agreement prepared by the district solicitor.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Belinsky, second by Mrs. McMeekin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.8, acceptance of the following resignations as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kleinfelder, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.9, approval of leave of absences as per board policy.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. McMeekin,
Second.
second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.10, acceptance of the following retirements as presented. Mrs. Lisa Horacio
So moved.
and Mr. Timothy Levengood.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Hughes, second by Mrs. McMeekin. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Are they with us this evening, Dr. Soter? Item 711, approval of the retirement resolutions. Moved by Mrs. McMeekin, second by Mrs. Belinsky. That moves us to item 712.
We don't have to vote on
Oh, the resolutions? All in favor?
this. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Got your
Thank
back.
you for, appreciate that. Item 12, approval of PSBA Legislative Policy Council Delegate, Mr. William Kleinfelder. Moved by Mrs. Meekin, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? Thank you, Will.
He's the perfect man for this meeting.
Should we vote on that too, you think? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 713, approval of independent contractors agreements as presented. Moved by Mrs. McMeekin. Second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 714, approval of student for early admission into the first grade. Moved by Mrs. McMeekin, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 715, approval of a confidential in lieu of FAPE agreement. Moved by Mrs. McMeekin, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Item 716, approval of confidential in lieu of FAPE agreement. Moved by Mrs. McMeekin, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 717, approval of a confidential tuition agreement for special education student. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I just want to be clear that I know what item we're voting on. We're on
717. We did the two FAPE agreements. Approval of the confidential tuition agreement. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Ms. Barkus, second by Ms. McMeekin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 718, approval of a non-resident enrollment in the 12th grade.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Belinsky, second by Mrs. McMeekin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 719, approval of a tuition agreement.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. McMeekin, second by Mrs. Belinsky. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 720, approval for installation of gym wall pads in the high school auxiliary gym.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kleinfelder, second by Mrs. McMeekin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 721, approval for installation of a gym divider.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. McMeekin, second by Mr. Kleinfelder. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I believe that takes us through the extent of the new business roll call votes. Item 8 on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for public comment on non-agenda items. We ask that information, proposals, and statements from questions or individuals pertaining to items not on those agenda be addressed at this moment. Speakers indicate their name, township of residence, and limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes. That moves us to item 9 on the agenda, board request for information.
I have a request for information. I was just hoping I could get some feedback on the policy or protocol for how teachers are relocated in our district. Not new ones, current.
The transfers.
Correct.
Sure.
Any other requests for information? Before we move to a request for adjournment, I would like to note that copies of the statement that I read are available because there was a lot of information in that. So to the extent we have any guests this evening that would like to have that, it is where?
Right. I have that, and I will put it over to the side, and we'll also post it online this evening.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. That concludes our meeting this evening.
Your turn.